Hey everyone, it's good to be here. I want to thank you for letting me kind of come into your conference space, and I know this is like a tribe meeting for you guys, and I'm part of a couple of groups that are like this in the missional world, so I know what it's like, so thanks for letting me kind of come in from the outside as a learner. I spend a lot of time in missional church, if you want to use that terminology. I teach missiology at seminaries. We help churches that are a little bit bigger try to pivot missionally, which is really hard. And then we also talk to folks like y'all that have innovative ideas about how to join God on mission through an organization called Forge America that I help lead. You might have heard like Alan Hirsch and Mike Frost and some of those people. So I spent a lot of time talking about mission, missiology. We share a friend that's in the digital space doing some cool stuff in the Methodist Church, but I personally have not delved into this. And so when Zach contacted me, I live here in town, I was like, yeah, I'd love to come, just learn and kind of and pick their brains and find out more about it. So thanks for having me be here. So I know that you know these folks in various depths, but I'm going to treat it like we don't. Both for the video and for myself. And so I want to start by just, maybe your name and what led you into this space, this way of kind of doing faith community.
My name is Mark, and I'm the lead pastor of Lutz Digital Church. We started Lutz in 2021 to be a light for all dark places. We exist entirely digitally, so we don't have any real, every person is physical who's part of our church, so I guess we have physical footprint all over the place, but we don't have any physical gathering. And so we have a studio in Western Pennsylvania, one in Tampa, and one in Wichita. And we have staff in those three places, and then we also have staff in outside of Madison, Wisconsin. We started Lux for a handful of different reasons. I've always had a pretty deep burden for reaching people that no one was reaching, and whether that was third world countries that were entrenched in sort of occult activity, or that was communities close to home in Western Pennsylvania that were just sort of destroyed and pillaged by the opioid epidemic and just didn't have healthy or good churches, or rural communities that infrequently, just really genuinely oftentimes don't have healthy churches. And so because I am a gamer and a nerd myself, kind of through and through, I think one of the catalysts, if I had to take like one moment and just say, here's a catalyst, during or leading, before the pandemic, because we really had the heart for this in 2019, I was watching Ninja Stream with Lupo and Tim the Tapman. And I was watching these guys broadcast their worldview unfiltered to the emerging generations in numbers that were exceeding 200,000 people between their three streams, 40 to 60 hours a week, nonstop. And I said, these three people have more influence over the next generation's worldview than any pastor on the planet. And the church has to have a voice inside of this space, because this is where people are going to look for community, connection, tribe, and truth. And so if the church does not have a voice here, they will have those answers. They'll find those answers, whether they ask those questions directly and someone answers them directly, albeit inaccurately, or if they just assume it by watching the way people act and the way people exchange with their chats and the way people interact with one another whenever they're gaming in groups. And so that was really a lot of the thing that propelled us to explore planting Lux. That and Henry Blackaby's book, Experiencing God, which just so many church planters that book has ruined and caused us to leave good paying jobs and go start things that were completely unstable. And so Experiencing God by Blackaby also is a major catalyst for that.
Good.
All right, so I am Nathan Webb, or in digital spaces, my username is typically Nerd Pastor Nate, so that's how you can find me. And I planted Checkpoint Church back in 2020. Whenever I was graduating from div school, I had this vision and this passion to plant something that would be for nerds, geeks, and gamers. My original vision that I pitched, I'm a United Methodist, I should say that. I'm a United Methodist, so we have conferences. And so I pitched to our church developer at our conference. I said, this is my idea. I think we should go to Comic-Con. I think we should reach the nerds, geeks, and gamers. I had no idea Love Thy Nerd existed at this point, or Game Church, or anything like that. This was way before I started researching. But I said, I have this vision, and I sat across from church developer with my heart on my sleeve and fully expected them to say, no, absolutely not. But instead, the guy that was across from me, his name was Dan Pizzette, and whenever I was talking to him, he kind of leans in real close and says, what do you think about D&D? And I got anxious. This was a guy in his 40s, and I was like, I don't know, the church has a bad history with D&D. So I'm going to be honest, be transparent. So I said, I DM for my buddies every Thursday. And then I breathe, and I brace myself, and he leans in a little closer and smiles and says, I DM every Sunday night. And so we clicked, and he believed in the vision and got it and was like, let's do this thing, let's experiment, let's see how this goes. That was February of 2020. March happened, and we said, oh, what's going to happen now? And so we figured out that where were the nerds going if they weren't at Comic-Con? The answer for us was Twitch. So we started to explore on Twitch, and when we got on Twitch, we reached people, we were having fun, and they said, hey, you need to stream more. And I said, I got a kid. I'm not going to be able to stream for longer. What can we do? And they said, well, you need a Discord. And so Discord changed my life, changed my world. I see it as a digital church building. It is our church building. It's unquestionably that. It is not just a digital community or a forum space. It is our church building. People walk into it and they are aware that they are in a place that they are welcomed. We've recreated it as best as we can to a church experience, and it is very much our building space. And then we figured out discipleship from that point on, but that was very much like the real turning point for me was not only reaching people online, but realizing, oh, there's a way to do church online. And so we are a fully online expression of church. We use the digital first term, but that's just because we like things like this that we might be able to do every now and again.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Philip. I'm the planter of Nerch in Germany, as you may have heard my German accent. And Nerch stands for nerd and church in one word, and that describes what we are. We are 100% nerd culture. We love nerds. We are nerds ourselves. Since I can think, I'm a nerd. There was no other reality for me. So I love my people. I love nerds. We love all kind of nerd culture. In our church, nerd culture is just welcomed. It's something that we celebrate. So, for example, if you come in a cosplay to us, maybe in other churches they will say, "Hey, can you please take off the cosplay?" In our church, we will celebrate you. It's like we will say, "You are the reason why we exist," and we are 100% church because we think nerd culture becomes much better when you put the gospel into it, because it is a great picture of the gospel. But many nerds are lost, and those are our focus. So we are there for non-believing nerds in Frankfurt. And why we started it, and can tell my wife much better.
Yeah, I'm Anika. I'm Philip's wife, and we're planting the church together with an amazing team that you might have met, Laura and Tana, also here. So we're a leadership team of 4 people right now. And yeah, why we started Nerch. So we started working for a church planting network in Frankfurt and also in Europe. So 2 networks, but they work together, so it's basically one. And we started working for them 5 years ago, and we never thought about church planting before. We just started working for them because we liked jobs they offered us. And we were at the beginning always joking and saying if we ever would plant a church, it would be a church for nerds, because we realized that most regular churches, obviously there are no normal churches, but the stereotype church is often not fitting for a nerd. They walk there and the first thing they see is a welcome tea. I myself, I would turn around and go back and come. So stuff like that. So we always said if we would ever plant a church, it would be a church for nerds. And then for some reason, this joke turned into a dream, into a vision, and now we're here, and we had our launch service 5 weeks ago. So now it's not just a dream and a vision, and it's also reality right now. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, when I saw Nerch Church and they were from Germany, I thought, oh, I'm going to ask them what does that mean in German? It's Nerd Church. It's very cool.
Sorry.
So yeah. Okay, so walk me through a typical gathering? And I know everyone in this room kind of does different things, and I've already picked up that it's more about nerd culture, which can be digital, in-person, board games, whatever it is. But for you guys, walk me through, like, what does a typical kind of faith community gathering look like? Or a week, you know?
Mine is the easy. This is such an interesting question because all three of our expressions are so vastly different when it comes to the word gathering. And I think the way we interpret and the way we live that out, I'll answer first just because I think mine is the closest to being a one-for-one, right? In many cases, Lux has been an attempt to serve as a bridge between what we see the church being in digital space and what the physical church is. And a lot of times you need bridge builders, at least initially for established organizations and established methods and ways of doing things to onboard. And so if you would gather with us, we gather on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. EST. Why? Because gamers are not awake on Sunday morning, and if they are, it's only to be at work. And so we're not doing church on Sunday morning. We do it on Wednesday night. It's sort of the midweek for us. The first 15 to 20 minutes of us being live on Twitch is me and my wife and usually one other person, literally just sitting on a couch, welcoming every single person by screen name, one at a time, answering the question of the day. Humor is an enormous part of the DNA of our church, and so there's tons of jokes, and we come costumed when it's near Halloween, and we come with Christmas hats around Christmas time, and so it's, we really do our best to just make sure there's moments that we are just doubled over laughing every single week. We go from there to worship. We have one worship song. That one's usually done live. From there, we go to prayer. People raise prayer concerns in our chat while we are doing worship. And then we have somebody who live prays for those things. And then I teach usually, or one of our team teaches, and that's usually anywhere from like 25 to 45 minutes. And so it's not short. Our services are about an hour and a half long, longer than your normal average church service. And then after that, the next piece of our service is we have like another worship piece. That one's usually pre-recorded, which is a mesh of our band that's all across the globe that records separately, and then we pull them together as one unified pre-produced thing that we watch and worship with together. And then after that, we have first step, next week, which is just our way of basically reiterating some announcements and letting people know where we're going next. And then I usually sit down on the couch and answer questions, do post-service, give a benediction, and then our service doesn't end then. We go over to Discord. We open up about a dozen voice and video chat rooms. We game together, listen to music together, hang out together. We have a welcome room, a prayer room, a meet the pastor room, all of those various things that you might see when you leave a church happen in Discord post-service. And we're usually there from anywhere between like 10 to 11 to maybe we get there at like 9:45, and we're there sometimes up until 1 o'clock in the morning, sort of gaming and hanging out together. So that's an average gathering on a Wednesday night for us.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way for me to explain what a gathering looks like for us is that we really have like two different genre of gatherings. So we have the synchronous, which means, of course, happening at the same time. And then we have asynchronous, which can be experienced at any time. And so I know that for some that may be difficult to like wrap our mind around, that asynchronous can still be a gathering space, but it is for us like unapologetically a form of gathering for us. And so the things that we do synchronously is we've recently started observing communion together. And so we have a way that people can receive elements from us. We send them out in a subscription box. It's free, but it just comes with a ton of little goodies that we can send to folks. And so we meet every Sunday night at 8 o'clock, and we just play games together and then take communion at the hour. But that's really all that is for. Once a month, we have a thing during that exact same time that's a little bit more intentional, kind of feels like a podcast. We bring in an expert about something. So maybe we will have somebody in that is able to talk about like racism at the gaming table. We'll have somebody that's written a book on it or loves talking about it, and will come in and really just break it down for us. And we call that DLC, which is difficult life conversation. So we want it to be vulnerable and raw and real in that time. And so that's like our synchronous gatherings. Throughout the week, we stream on Twitch, and that's a form of gathering. We get lunch together, and then we're just kind of present with one another in our various Discord spaces. But then a lot of the stuff that's going to feel more familiar for worship is going to happen asynchronously. And so our first level of discipleship there was a thing that we call nerdy sermons. And so we post those on YouTube, and they are most easily compared to a video essay. And so if you would watch on YouTube video essays, that's kind of what we're doing. It's a 10 to 15 minute, like really tightly edited, meant to be super entertaining and engaging piece of content that people can consume on their own time. And so then we interact with that. We have Bible studies based around that. We have comment sections. We have conversations happening in the Discord, but it's still like unapologetically asynchronous. People get to it when they get to it, and then experience it together. I would say another form of the blending of these two things is our prayer request channel. And so we have a prayer request channel in our Discord, and so it's going to feel very familiar for anybody that's ever done a prayer request channel or a prayer request wall or what have you online. But what I love about our space is that I felt like growing up in the rural church, the traditional church, like who prays for you? Probably your pastor, maybe a prayer team if they're like really getting it, you know, if they are really putting things together. But odds are it's just a pastor that you share your prayer requests with. The beauty of asynchronous digital church is that we have people at 2 o'clock in the morning that'll drop a prayer request, and I won't be the first one to read it. And that was such a game changer for me, was realizing like, oh, that's worship. Oh, that's gathering. That's us really clicking on a spiritual level, because there are people praying for people before the pastor even knows, before I'm even aware. I don't send out the prayer list. It is live updating and experienced in real time. And so that's like a glance at some of the things, but we do so much all over the place that it is hard. But that's how I try to differentiate in my brain is what do we do together and what can be experienced at any time, but still feel like a form of gathering. Oh, yes. Keep doing that.
I hope my mic is working because now it's blinking, but before it was not on. So maybe we will see. We'll keep talking. So we have 2 types of gatherings, and one is the most easiest way we found. Because Anika and I would play video games anyway. If we're not planting Nerch or play Magic, we would play it anyway. We would watch Harry Potter or Star Wars anyway. So we were like, why not open those times for others to join? So what we do is, if we play Magic, we invite others to our home, to our living room, which is in Frankfurt, in Germany, very unusual to invite people to your home. So people have to trust you before they come. And that is why we also have another way of gatherings. I think that's the bigger one. It's that we're going to things that are already there. So our gatherings don't have to be hosted by us. So if there's a convention near to us, we go there. Anika loves cosplay, so we go to a convention and meet there others. And that's already for us as a church gathering. Because we meet people that we can serve there, we can help them. We always say, serve the people where you're at. And we would be there anyway, so why not serve there? And this is our church gathering. And of course, we also have some events that we do, and Anika can explain them.
So we do have every other week after work gaming event. And so we invite people just to our home at 5 o'clock. So after we finish work, come to us and we just hang out and play video games or board games or whatever we want to do. Normally for 3 hours around, and then we grab something to eat at the community. And then we also just started, because we just had our lunch, we just started to have a service once a week, that is also, once a month, that is also in our home. And that is basically the same, but we will also have an input. So normally we sit together and play something, either digital or board game or so, for 2 hours or so, and then we will have an input, and normally we try to connect the input to what we just played. So, for example, the first service we played the new Mario Party, and then afterwards we had an input about the concept of bonus stars, and how that applies to life, and what the gospel says about that. So we always try to make the bridge really easy to connect. We're trying to make the entrance barrier as low as possible for the people to come. That's what we do right now.
So you two are more in person with people. I found your what you said really interesting about people jumping in on prayer requests even before the pastor. I don't know what you call yourself in your community. Do you find that people in the community are reaching out to you like a pastor, or are they primarily using the community for support, like people they've connected with in different ways? So are there life situations getting taken care of, maybe sometimes without you even knowing about it?
I think that, again, it's a little column A, little column B, and I think that's probably the ideal of the church, right? Of like the laity supporting one another, of the members of the church, living into one another's lives as the body that's present. But yes, there is like a level of vulnerability as the pastor of the space, and there's a certain level of like, I make myself radically available. And so that certainly helps. Like I will be the pastor when they need me to be. But in all honesty, where I found most of the laity stepping up for each other is either in times of hardship, like prayer requests, or in times of social need. So there's only so much that I can provide of my bandwidth. Like I can do stuff on Twitch. But I mentioned I got kids, right? Like I have a limit to how much I can offer, but they can group up and go play D&D together. Like they can do that. They don't need my permission to go join a D&D group or to figure something out. And we can offer those kind of things and facilitate them, but also it can come up organically just from them loving on one another and creating spaces that fill whatever need they might have.
Yeah. What about at Lux?
I mean, yeah, I absolutely fill the role of a pastor in a lot of our church members' lives. And so I get a lot of requests like, hey, can I meet with you? Can we get together one-on-one? But I think, right, like if you look at the book of Ephesians, the job of a pastor is not to do the work of ministry, but equip the saints for the work of ministry. And so, we're coming up on about 4 years, and we're really beginning to break into that now. And so, like Zach, who's in the room with us, one of the things that he started doing was co-working. And so he would just wake up in the morning, get in a voice chat, and we would have anywhere from 3 to 20 people who would be in there anywhere from a couple of hours in the morning to 10 or 12 hours a day. And they are all at home working, but just spending time together in this chat. Have a music bot in there, they're listening to something, they're hanging out. It started watching League of Legends Worlds together during the workday when people could stop and watch some League. They would watch some League together and watch a match. And what it has developed into now is this really thriving community that cares for one another. From there, we've also seen that take place through small groups. So we have a team at our church called our support team, which is just me and a group of people who go over all the prayer concerns every week and see about following up. Can we provide a meal? Should we send a card in the mail? We're physically, tangibly doing things. We say provide a meal. We'll reach out, get an address, and DoorDash something to their house in order to provide a meal for somebody who maybe had a baby or is coming out of the hospital or is going through a hard time. But right now what we're doing is we're doing a lot more of that through the context of our small groups. And so we have, like 10 or 12 small groups. And we have about 70 people who are in groups right now. And so if we have someone who's coming up on a hard time, we now do a lot of that care through the context of small groups. Our support team reaches out to small group leaders, and the small group leaders care for the members of their group. And so our support team primarily now just operates caring for people who are not on teams and are being cared for by team leaders, or not in small groups and are being cared for by small group leaders.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, a quick follow-up question over
Yeah.
here. Quick question, small groups, are those still all digital and online, or do you have some that are like, hey, you guys are all in the same town, you can get together in person too?
Yeah, if you're thinking like from a Lux standpoint, unless I tell you it's physical, it is always going to be digital. So everything that we do is digital top to bottom. All of our small groups are digital. My recovery group that I'm leading is digital. Like all of our community nights are digital. Our craft night, digital. All of that stuff, all very much. Like our Thanksgiving hangout we'll announce tonight. We're doing a cookbook with our church right now where people are submitting recipes. Also a digital cookbook. We'll release a PDF of it.
And you'll eat it digitally, right?
And we will eat that. We will not eat a digital dinner. Everything you can pretty much plan, that's all going to be digital, with the exception of things that I highlight as being physical gatherings. And so like we have a handful of small physical gatherings. There was one in Atlanta at Battle and Brew, which is a board game shop and brewery in Atlanta this year. NCMS is technically a physical meetup for us. We have a handful of people who call our church home who are here at NCMS. But there's never a time when it's like, we're all together. It's just like, hey, sometimes when we're going to be in a physical location, we'll do something localized. We do it at Exponential each year. We'll do something localized there because we're there. So it just sort of, but yeah, it's going to be digital unless I say that thing is physical.
Yeah. Any other questions real quick? Yeah.
I was going to say, for somebody who's trying to get into the space, it seems like you guys have been doing this for a while, that you have a lot of connections. How would you invite newer people to the space? So for example, just for me, I see all the different discords and I want to be a part of it. I just don't even know where to start. How can you encourage somebody to join the space, and how do you encourage them to be feel like they belong there?
That's on my list, so.
Yeah, I mean, we've been really clear about the fact that we've been trying to align people and pull them in together and get people to network and build relationships. NCMS is a major part of that. It's like, hey, the collective is a place where you can connect with other people of like mind. The summit is a place where you can connect with people of like mind. This is a place that you can work together. Myself and Nate and a handful of others are in an org leaders network, right? And it's just those of us who are dealing with the very real day-to-day problems of not having enough money to do the ministry that we're trying to do, for the most part. And we get together once a month for an hour and we share what roadblocks we're facing and what things we're celebrating. It's super simple, but it just gets us connected and in community with one another. And so more of it is, we call it, the reason we call our podcast the Nerd Culture Ministry Underground is because people don't realize the groundswell of believers who are in the space who are now actually working together. And so I would say be in the NCMC Discord, find some people there to connect with. You'll be able to see, man, there's a lot of other people on Twitch that are already streaming and making content. At Lux, we have stream partners, people that we financially invest in as missionaries every month. We have 4 of them. And a lot of them are like, listen, I can't disciple people because I'm streaming, right? I can't always be discipling, but you can. And so they'll meet people where they are, part of their communities, and then they'll funnel them actually into our church to be involved in small groups and discipleship times. And I think they'll even like raid into live stream services on Wednesday nights and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question, but I think like being here is a major step in that direction.
Yeah, the first thought that came to my mind was NCMS as a connection point, and I think that is something that was like a leg up for me getting into it, was that I was a part of a connection, I was a part of a denomination. And so having a denominational leader to kind of guide and direct me certainly helped me, but I know that not everybody's in that situation. And so I think that NCMS is filling that void for a lot of folks that don't necessarily have that. I can say that on a personal level, on a pragmatic level, like I am doing the best that I can with side hustles here and there to like come up with lists of reading recommendations that I have for people that want to get into digital ministry. So I have like an Amazon list of like 10 books that I can recommend to you, and try and write blogs and try and put content out there. I'm not a coach by any extent, but like just putting out things that are working for me so that people can hopefully learn from my mistakes and from the successes. That's what I'm trying to offer back to people, because I know that not everybody is going to hear the advice of like, well, just go talk to your conference developer. Like that's not going to mean anything to most people. So finding places like this for connection, and then finding people that are leaders in the space that are creating content for the purpose of building you up is pretty helpful.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me just say one. I would just say this as well. I was streaming 9 hours a week when we started Lux, but the times that I wasn't streaming, I was just searching the Christian tag and hanging out in streams. And then over and over and over again, I was just sending DMs and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. I streamed only to build enough validity that people would take meetings with me. And so as soon as I was getting meetings, I quit streaming. But I was just like meeting with people every single week. I'd have like 2 streamers a week that I was meeting with just to build connections and get to know people. It's a lot of offline work. It's a lot of when you're not live, spend time in people's streams, get to know people, have your name pop up in their chats, invite them into conversations, jump into a Zoom call with them, learn from them, get to know their heart and their vision. Zach is like the absolute king at that, right? Like Zach does not stream, but there's very few Christian streamers that are unaware of St. Bear because he's in all of their chats, and he's met with almost all of them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Your boss doesn't.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to your question, because when we started, we were pretty alone. Not in case of church planting. We had a lot of good church planters around us, got a lot of good mentors, but nobody of them did nerd ministry before. Nobody knows what is it and how to do it. And the thing, how we get connected to people like Mark or Baba from LTN, was like that we just shared our story with everybody that we met. And then at one point we share our story with a friend in Texas, and he knows Baba, and that's how we know about others that are doing the same. So my approach would be share your story and share your passion. Even if the others are no nerds, share it, because maybe they know someone that knows people like Mark. And then 3 months later, we were sitting in Texas with Mark and talking about nerd ministry. And share your story with others. That's an entrance, yeah.
What, this kind of follows up that. So what are the unique challenges to this space as maybe opposed to other church planting? And maybe they're the same, I don't know.
Moderation is pretty different, right? Like having a good set of mods and having people that are trained and not just trained in like the usual. So in like the UMC system, we have like safe sanctuary. And so you might have like a model that you have set up of like, you can't have more than 2 people in a room alone. You got to have this many volunteer leaders. You got to have this kind of stuff. Like we had to do the work of building that from scratch because just like you were saying, nobody's done it for the digital spaces. And so we had to figure out, okay, well, how do we have the handbook so that we can train people so that we can make sure that we're providing the most safe space possible for our 13 to 18 year olds and for our vulnerable adults in the spaces. And so that is, I think, a unique element that not everybody has to think about, but we have to be considerate of like, we need to build these spaces to be safe and then share that with our traditional churches that are trying to get into the online space. Because I can think of a lot of churches that have started up a Facebook group and not been at all prepared for trolls. Or have been like, tell me about that Discord thing. And I'm like, are you sure? Or like they need to know what exactly it requires and the volunteers that it requires to keep those spaces adequately safe.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I talked to Jay Kendra from Saddleback, who's been their online pastor forever, and he said they ran into a lot of the stuff with moderation as well. And he said the church isn't in the business of censorship, which is a really interesting dynamic because I think there is this, it's a double-edged sword. The power to be able to censor and remove comments and to deal with things is a double-edged sword. For me, I think the things that are the most challenging is, there's a couple of things. One, the anonymity of the internet is also a double-edged sword. It's great because people can engage how they want, when they want, and we don't force them through our own funnel. That's a beautiful thing. I've had people lurk for months before they've ever said hello in a chat, and then they're super engaged now. They never would have done that in a physical church. The anonymity of the internet also means that people can change their screen names, leave our server, ghost me, and block me, which has happened plenty of times, and they are just gone. I'm not going to bump into them at Walmart later that week and be like, hey man, why'd you block my number? Which I might do in a local physical church. So that's a double-edged sword. It's a challenge. Finances are a challenge as well. When you plant an online church, one of the unique things is that most of the people who are coming into your church are also involved in another church, of which they are tithing to. And they are trying to figure out if this is their home. And even when they identify it as their home, they still identify their money going to a physical church that they're attending on the weekends, even if they don't identify that church as their home. It takes a long time and some really hard and direct conversations with people to get them to recognize that supporting what they identify as their spiritual home is important. And then you have a lot of people who are just like, man, they've never been in church before. They haven't been in church in a long time. And it takes a long time for people to get to the point that they're discipled. And it's an added level of difficulty because we are entirely online and there's plenty of reasons to not trust organizations that you're experiencing through the internet. And so I think that those things present unique challenges. On just a really personal level, just to be entirely honest, it's wildly grueling and taxing and mentally horrible. I mean, as the lead pastor of Lux, it has been the most mentally taxing, abusive, difficult thing I have ever had to do in my life. I've wanted to quit virtually every day. Most people don't know that. They just look at the outside and they say, oh, here's this thing that looks like it's working really well. And what most people don't realize is you feel extremely alone. You're immediately isolated from the friends that you did have in physical ministry because they just don't understand. The people that you thought were going to be on your side end up being your enemies because they just don't want to go where you're going. Your own family can't follow you very frequently. That's exceedingly painful. And so it's a mental game. Like it has tested every single level of my mental resiliency and my spiritual resiliency, areas that I didn't know that I would be tested in. And I think that's part of counting the cost of planting one of these digital experiences is, I know that that's true for all church planting, Rowland. I've just never planted a physical church. But it is hard.
Yeah, and there would be things that you guys deal with that would be very different. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you also, but then come back because connect this, like someone that's in person at your home is going to be a little bit self-regulated with their comments, who they are, their name, you kind of know where they live, where someone at Lux or at your church, the Checkpoint could change their name, they can say anything they want online and totally disappear. So the transparency thing.
So I will come to this at the end of my answer. So first to the challenge, which is unique in our case. For us, the challenge is to really build a church and not just another community around nerd culture. Because I like that the people come to us that we all have something already in common. That's a strength. I think many churches search for something like that. All people that come to us love Nintendo or Mario or World of Warcraft. We all have something in common, or we can understand at least each other why we spend 1,000 euros on magic cards, right? We all have something in common. But the challenge in that is to not just build another convention around those nice things, but we really want to plant a church where Jesus is the center, and we want to keep our nerdiness. Don't lose it. We want to keep it, but we also want to be 100% church, and that's a challenge because sometimes when we come to the point that I hold the sermon or Anika, sometimes I feel like, okay, now it's a little bit weird. Why not go back and play video games? It feels more comfortable, right? But no, we really want to preach the gospel to that people. But that's a challenge. And to your question, before people come to us, there's a lot of one-on-one relationships, which Anika's much better than I. But people need a lot of trust in you before they come in person. Because, like you said, they sit in front of you. We know where they live. We know their name. From some people, we don't know the real name. We still use a gamer name or Discord name in person. It's totally normal for us. But yeah, it's a challenge. And what is also a challenge is that you can see how many people are there. You also can see it. I totally understand. But when I also stream, what I do is I don't look on the number of the viewers. I just delete it. You hide it. Yeah, I hide it. But in person, so at our second house church, nobody was there, and you see it. There is nobody, and that is also maybe a unique challenge, right? Something. Okay.
Expand a little bit. I'm going to expand on the concept of having to be like the awkward transition from the fun games to the preaching part. That is another unique challenge, I think, is that you do have to do some translation. There's going to be some work that has to, like, a one-to-one doesn't always work. And even with a closer to one-to-one experience, it's highly curated. You know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it and how it's going to best maintain the attention of the people. The reason that I did a video essay is because I knew that for me, like, to put together a United Methodist worship service, people were going to be gone by like 60 seconds in, right? And so I had to make something snappy, entertaining, and right into like what we're doing so that then I can get them on board with the more conversations behind the scenes. And so there is like an element of translating that has to happen in order to do things that are typically successful in traditional contexts that are going to have to look different to appeal to people in a digital context.
Yeah. Any expansion on?
And this is just with.
Yeah. So asking about the maybe you'll be able to reword it better.
Really around legality of minors who are involved in church, because everybody comes in, right? I always say every person comes into our church without age, gender, or disability. And so we get to know people before we know any of those things about them. We know screen name and profile picture, and that's about it. We have some levels of protection, right? Because we're on borrowed platforms. So we're using Twitch and we're using Discord. They have to agree to all of the stuff when they're coming into those platforms to be able to get access to it, right? So I'm not just reaching out to their 14-year-old daughter and being like, hey, would you like to go to lunch this week, right? Like, can you ask your parents if it's okay first, right? So we're engaging. Now, we do have people who are minors who are part of our community. There are a couple of barriers to those things that we have to have in place. I always say we're one of the only 18-plus churches. That's a joke. But what I mean is like, in order to serve on our team, you have to be 18 or older. And we take that in our team application. In order to receive pastoral counseling for us, you have to be 18 or older. We won't even take parental consent. Like, you have to be 18 or older, just because it's so hard to legitimately check how old somebody is. To be on Discord, you have to be 13 years or older. If someone come in and they confess, hey, I'm 11 years old, we actually have to report them and get them kicked off the platform. We can't let them in our server. And that's Discord's policy. I realize that's not the average church policy, but for us, like, we are on a borrowed platform, and so we have to play by their rules, right? They're offering their building to us to be able to set up our rooms and do our stuff, which means we're under their lease. We need to play by their rules in the same way that we are on Twitch. We play by their rules whenever we're live streaming. So some conversations that we might have them in different places than where we might not have them live on Twitch because of the nature of said conversations. Twitch might not be totally comfortable with it. We are careful with how we speak about hell whenever we're on Twitch. Just to be carefully like we will talk about it from a really academic sense, but we're not yelling and screaming you're going to hell because people get in a lot of trouble for that on Twitch. People get banned for that on Twitch. And so there is ways that we have to navigate that, but there's no way for us to say, oh, okay, this person's 17 years old and they just joined our community and we have to treat them accordingly. Like our whole team is like picking up on context clues as quickly as we can. And to be honest with you, sometimes we don't know if we have a 17-year-old or we have someone who's on the spectrum who's 35. And we don't know that until we're like with them in a voice chat. Like Mandy from our community, really sweet girl. She's in her mid-20s. She has a disability. She has the mentality of about like a 9 or a 10-year-old, something like maybe like a 15-year-old. And totally sweet. I've had lots of conversations with her, but then we've also had times where we had someone who was typing to us. It was totally mature. And one of my team members jumped into a call and it was like very clear this is a 14-year-old girl. And then it's like, get out. Like, get out now, get out as quickly as you can, get somebody else in that room with you. You are not alone in the room in that voice chat with that minor. I'll literally be in scenarios where I'm like, do you have a parent in the room? Because like, I want to make sure that you're actually allowed to be on the internet right now. And usually when I talk to a parent, I'm like, hey, just be careful with what you let your kid on online, especially on Discord, because they're getting into these places and you lucked out in the fact that they landed in a really safe place to land tonight. But that doesn't mean they'll land in a really safe place tomorrow night. And so just keep an eye on where they are. My name's Mark. Here's all the stuff, and we are a 501c3 and we're also a church in the state of Pennsylvania. And so there are rules and regulations. Sure. So we have to keep things like background checks and clearances. We do all that stuff through Planning Center. That changes state to state. Let's not even talk about international. Try to get background checks and clearances from someone in Canada on our team. It's a freaking nightmare. And so we operate constantly in a slight gray area when it comes to laws because there's just not a lot of regulation around it. And there's a tremendous amount of sort of like, don't limit my free speech around the internet that stops laws from being implemented on what you can and cannot do in the space.
And Nathan, you would legally be a 501c3 or
correct. So
church,
also 501c3 status.
Yeah.
And we're, again, there's elements of like being a part of a connection and a denomination that we have even more kind of support in a legal basis. And so that we have people that are able to look over things. We have like conference trustees and a conference attorney who like is able to look at those kind of things. But again, aware not everyone has that. So we also developed, and you're welcome to go download it if you want to use it for something to like base off of. But we took like the legal document of our safe sanctuary policy, rewrote it for a digital church, and it is available. So checkpointchurch.com/safepoint if you want it. But that is totally yours. Take it, use it. But one of our big rules is very much terms of service. Like we're going to lean on the terms of service. We're actually going to read the terms of service, know what we're getting into when we start a platform that we take seriously. But we also have a hard rule of no DMs, and that's awkward. And it's not always respected, and we try to be like as gentle as we can when we know that it's not respected. Because again, like I said, like there are going to be people that are going to DM and set up a D&D group. So I try not to be like awful about it, but we set that as like an expectation so that it can bleed into the culture that we're creating so that it doesn't create any kind of awkward scenarios. And so if they want a private space, we've got tickets. Open up a ticket, that's just you and the mods. Like, that doesn't have to be seen by everybody. If you've got something that needs to be said that can't be seen by everyone, we've got spaces for that. If it truly has to be a DM, then we have background checked people that you can DM. But like, we try to make that a policy of, we don't advise that you DM anyone ever. And that's a hard and fast like thing that we try to get across. So that's going to be different for everybody that's going to approach this in different ways. But that's one way that we've found an effective means of just nipping it in the bud. Especially whenever it comes to not just minors, but like we said, we expand to vulnerable adults. So we want to make sure that that is not a space that's abused.
We're like in DMs in the first 12 minutes of people joining in. We have a whole welcome team who's dedicated to recording videos and sending them out in DMs to every new person.
Totally.
It's a very different approach.
Very different.
Yeah.
Wait, so you guys are completely opposite then?
We're literally the exact opposite. Yeah.
So I have a question, follow-up question with this. So with like you had said that you have to bend that everybody's 18 plus, whatever, when they're volunteering. Do you require ID in order to vet that process? This might be for both of you. Like, how do you make sure that the people who are volunteering are above that age?
I lean on the terms of service, so I assume that they're above the age of 13, and if I find out that they're not, we'll report.
Okay.
But as far as our leadership, I don't require the ID. So we do the background checks and we fulfill that. But
Yeah, we literally asked for date of birth. We found that most people don't lie about that. Theoretically, people could, but they could lie about that when they come to your physical church too.
Yeah.
And so, as it turns out, most people who can lie in a digital church can also lie in a physical church. And so we run into they're not different issues; they're the same issues. People lie no matter where they are. It's easier sometimes in my context. We do not require an ID, but I am not going to invite you to be on my team. Everything is the context relationship. So once you fill out an application to join a team, a member of our team called the Vanguard walks you through our onboarding process, which is built through like a learning plan in Right Now Media. You have to have coffee chats. If you're not going to turn on your camera, like we're not going to invite you into our team. Like we need to know you are who you say that you are, and we need to have established and built a relationship with you before you ever get a chance to join our teams. Mm-hmm. So everything that we do at Lux drives towards relationship. We want to really get to know who you are. If you want to get involved here, you're not going to stay in DMs or stay in just a text format for a very long time. Mm. Yeah.
There are background checks.
Well, yeah, when we do background checks. Yeah, we do background checks as well.
Yeah, make that.
You can.
I didn't know what to do with it. I just let it go.
Yeah, it's okay. I can I can tell you how it is in Germany if you want, but it's totally different. So
Well, we're an in-person church, so that's like completely different.
Yeah.
But
Do you have any minors in your community?
We do have one, basically.
yeah.
But like she's also close, like the whole family is a close friend with us. So it's like she would come to our house anyway. So I mean, in Germany, the rules would be like until you're 14, you can be outside anywhere you want until 8 o'clock, and then until 10 o'clock when you're 16, and then when you're 18, you can do whatever you want. It's.
But let me ask
easy to be
just a
in-person
quick.
church in that
It's gonna be
case.
easy to tell the difference.
Let me ask a quick demographic question, because I need to learn.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, maybe incorrectly, that the demographic in the nerd space, whether in person or online, is younger. Ish?
No, it's
no?
not.
No, it's not.
The average nerd is like between 33 and 38, something like that. That's
Okay,
like the
well,
average age.
That's fairly young compared to prevailing church demographics. it
Yeah,
is.
okay, for church,
So,
but it's not as
I
many
would think
minors
there's-
as you would
I would
think.
think that might continue, knowing what I know about trends in prevailing churches. So this is could become an issue. I mean, this could become a big issue where you have minors and adults mixing in spaces and the legalities of that and the internet. So how are you thinking about that, or you're kind of just going to lean on the platforms to kind of carry the big load, or is this an ongoing conversation?
Yes. Yeah. So again, this is a part of the system and the structures. So we revise our Safe Points policy every year. So we look at it together every year. We say what's new, what's happening in the zeitgeist culturally, like what are people talking about in safety online. Thankfully, like most of the big platforms, especially Discord, really care about this. And so they are also doing the work. And so you can go and learn from them, and you can go to webinars that nobody's signing up for, and you can be the person there in that webinar learning from Discord's team that cares about this stuff. And so when you find that information, you plug and play. You figure it out and you move forward with the future. And that is something that I'm trying to embody in the work we're doing so that I can guide others into that exact same thing.
Yeah, okay, good. Yes, sir. He's been raising his hand for a while.
So
We do communion, and that's very new for us. So we just started doing, I mentioned that subscription box. And so that was important to us, was to find some way to not just recreate or carbon copy some kind of like, all right, come to our Zoom room and we're going to read off the liturgy, and then maybe you have some like Mountain Dew and tortilla chips near you. Like that was not our goal. I'm not dogging on it. Good for anybody for doing what you can do with what you've got. But we wanted to be really intentional about what we were creating and recreating the experience of communion in a way that made sense and was edifying to the digital life. And so what we started to do was to ask, well, what's something that is missing? We can go through the liturgy, we can read the stuff, we can do the epiclesis, we can experience the historic stuff, but what are we missing? And so for me, what our community sussed out is that we were missing the element of being in the same room together. Just didn't feel the same whenever we were on a Discord call or on a Zoom call. It didn't feel quite as grounded. And so what we started to do was I would have our logo displayed on their phone screen or on their computer screen, and I would ask them to put their finger to it, to touch it, and then I had an extra little bit of the liturgy that I explained, hey, look, we are all touching the exact same point in cyberspace right now. Like, we are literally touching the exact same point in time, streamed from the computer that has streamed everything we've ever done before. And that was really impactful. That really meant something to people. And then we iterated upon that about 2 months ago and built an app that has a button. And the button now recreates that experience, but it is able to be interactive. And so when people touch the button, a number goes up. And it says the present body. How many people are in the body right now? And the number goes with every person that touches that button. And it just goes up and up and up. And you can feel this kind of visceral experience of this is the body of Christ present online in cyberspace right now. Like, it was incredible. And so for us, everything that we do sacramentally, if we're going to be creative with these things, like, let's not just be creative, but be edifying to the digital life. And so I'm exploring baptism. Fortunately, I've got time because I haven't anybody that's like knocking on the door that's like, I'm ready to be baptized today. But when we get there, we're going to take it seriously like we did with communion and trust that the Holy Spirit is going to be in that and help us to figure out a way to edify that properly.
The sacraments were key before we started. We kind of had the idea of how we're going to do it. And so for us, we do the Lord's Supper on the first Wednesday of every month towards the end of service. I have bread and juice in studio. We ask people to gather common elements. We read something similar to the word. I come from a non-denominational background, and I've been out of denominations, no offense to Nate, but praise the Lord, for a long time. And I don't have intentions of going back. So I don't have some of sort of like the hooks around it that I have to have in place. And so we read some scripture together. We talk about its meaning and its intention. We ask people to gather common elements, and we partake together live. And so that's how we do Lord's Supper. And so for some of our people, that is Doritos and Mountain Dew. For some of our people, they get crackers and grape juice. For some people, that might be wine and bread. Just depends on where they are and what they're doing. And then for baptism, that's been something that's been incredibly important for us. And so we've done baptism in a handful of different ways. One of the ways that we'll do it is ideally, we help you find a local pastor near you that will baptize you. And we have you baptized with a congregation that's not even your own, but we want you to be baptized. The next one is if you don't have somebody, we want a Bible or a Jesus-believing family member. We'll train them and equip them to baptize you. They can baptize you anywhere there's a body of water. We ask it to be recorded. They send it to us, and then we celebrate it by playing it back on a Wednesday night service. So it's a public proclamation of faith in our faith community. Some of our people who haven't had that, and so we had like a girl who was baptized by her husband in their bathtub in Missouri with her son there, while me and my wife were on a Zoom call pronouncing Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, recording it, and then praying over them. And then sometimes they don't have anybody, and so they'll get non-believing friends to baptize them, and I'll be on a Zoom call, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and praying over them, recording it, and then playing it. When it comes to weddings, that's one I would still like to be in person for. I do have friends who do like VR baptisms, and I'm not there, but I understand why they are. Who are part of VR churches, and we have members of our church who are baptized in VR, and so I'm not necessarily against it. It's just not where I am, and I can't do that. When it comes to weddings, I've done a wedding from our church. I've done a couple, but some of those people were like local. The one that wasn't, like I went to Tennessee, and I hung out in Nashville with them for a weekend, and I did their premarital counseling leading up to it, and I got all of my correct credentials in the state of Tennessee, and I spent the weekend with them and did their wedding and still stay connected with them to this day. So, yeah. So I'll go out and travel to do a wedding. I don't really want to do that one over a TV screen. I'm curious about if you guys have started or what you're looking at sacrament-wise for Nerch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, should I? Okay. So we are very at the beginning, and most of the people that come to us are non-believing. So we're not at a baptism yet, which I hope we will be at one point. That's the reason why we do it. But the thing that we started very at the beginning was prayer. Pray together, because that is for the most people something they never did before. but it's also something that unites you and that creates like a room of unity, but also it's a spiritual thing. It's really powerful. Last year we had a barbecue with all the people that we have contacts to, and we prayed for the dinner. And I will already count something like this as a start of those sacrilege. So we're very at the beginning at the moment. But of course it will be all in person because we are an in-person church. But and what is funny is most of our people ask us about the wedding thing. So Anika, you can tell, but yeah.
You mean Lisa?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a girl once. She's really skeptical. Like, she asked me all the skeptical questions. I had like a really hard time. But she still likes us, so I hope I did a good job. And she asked us like if like Nerch also would officiate weddings. They think it's really cool to have like a nerdy themed wedding and then actually have a pastor there that's also like nerdy and would preach about some nerdy stuff or like I don't know, like have some nerdy elements in there. So that's actually one of the questions we get asked most, if Nerch would also do that.
What can the Big C Church learn from what you're doing?
How long do we have?
How long do we have? It'll be a little bit arrogant, but I want to know, like, here's what I have learned about participating with God in this space as a pastor, and this is what the church should realize.
I think when it comes to ways how to reach people, first of all, ask God. I sometimes feel like church have like one model, and I think that model is the one that works, but they don't look what kind of people they want to reach. So I think when we started, I will not say we did it perfectly, but we had the target group before we had the method. So we know who our people are, and our first approach was, we just want to get to know them and want to become their friends. And then we can think about how do we reach them. So we really want to know them. That was when I have one good friend. He's the leader of a Nintendo fan club in Frankfurt. When I got to know him, I don't want to know him because I want to get him into my church or because I want to test some methods on him or some concepts. No, I want to know him because he's a great guy. He likes Zelda like me, and I just want to be his friend, and I really want to know him, and I want to be his best friend. And I think that if you have this approach, and then you find the methods to reach him, I think that can be, that's a good way. Because then you really design everything that it fits to the person. And you don't want, sorry my English, but
they're not your project.
They're not your project, and they're not your test object, or they're not the person that you try to fit into a method to which people know you fit the method to the people. That's something that I would say, yeah.
I have 3 things, I think. First of all, being a church for non-Christians. Like, I feel like most existing churches are a church for Christians. But the purpose of a church is to reach the unreached. So we have to preach the gospel every Sunday. We have to, explain everything like someone haven't heard anything about the Bible ever. I think that is one thing that is really important. Then just like be creative. Someone said creativity immediately. So be creative, try and error, and just test new things. Don't always stick to everything. And thirdly, trust the Bible that the harvest is plentiful. A lot of churches think when there's a new church plant coming along, they will just steal all the people. But we are far away from competitive church planting. The harvest is plentiful, and we need more churches, and we're not competing there.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I'll say is after Bubba's talk about the Vatican mascot, right? Like, I feel like that is something that has been a stickler on my mind for a little while since I learned about it. And I feel like that is a bold move of stop telling and start listening. Be aware of what people are passionate about, and start practicing the art of like holy discernment, kind of like York was talking about this morning, of like just actually being accepting of the thing that there is creativity, there is imago Dei, there is that image of God in the act of creation. And so be more open to the nerd stuff. Like, I feel like the church historically has been so good at making those boundaries of like, not that thing. That thing's not okay. But we have this alternative over here, right? Like, that's been our history. And so instead of always just telling people, no, this thing is okay, this thing's not, start listening to what people are saying and actually like relating to them on a heart-to-heart level. And even if you discern that something is not helpful or beneficial, at least you've had the conversation and you've listened to them and it arrived at that. The second thing is I have the awesome opportunity to be my John Wesley self and circuit ride every now and again and guest preach. So I will go to churches and I will get to preach for them and tell them about Checkpoint and tell them a little story. And I always tell them the exact same thing because I think that this is something that so many churches need to hear. This is preaching to the choir. This is not for y'all. But I always tell churches this. I say, you need to let your sound booth people out from behind the door. Let them onto your leadership team. Let them give you some ideas. Let them talk to you about what they're hearing and feeling and seeing in the future of the church, because I feel like we've got these wonderfully gifted and creative people and we put them behind ProPresenter and we're like, that's your job. So start asking the questions of your sound people, and that is my totally preaching to the choir moment, but that's an important message for the capital C Church.
And then you get an amen from way back in the room, right?
Actually, it's more of a why'd he say my name? We know our tech nerds.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many audio guys from churches are in our church. It's like a ton of them. It's like
they feel seen.
So many of them. I've been working on this for a while, and so one of the things that I'm doing at Exponential over the course of this next year is trying to translate what we've learned to physical churches. And so we're doing right now 3 intellectual shifts to understand digital space in a new way. The first one I'll give you, and we might not get to all 3, but the first one I'll give you is that if you're my age or older, you're primarily hybrid and dualistic, which means we are physical and digital beings, but we view them as 2 different spaces. We have a physical and we have a digital presence. The younger you are, the more likely that you are hybrid but holistic, meaning you cannot separate those 2 from one another. You are seamlessly in both worlds and you walk seamlessly between them. The older you are, that just means the more likely you are to see the internet as a tool. It was a replacement for the encyclopedia, right? That's what it was for me. I was taught how to look up stuff in a card catalog one year. 2 years later, we went to the computer lab and I was taught how to search stuff in a Yahoo search bar, right? Internet has been a tool for me. My daughters, that's not the case. The internet is not a tool, it is a place. And they interact with it as a place. And until the church can learn to be hybrid and holistic instead of hybrid and dualistic, it'll become increasingly less relevant to the emerging generations. The other thing that I would say is that the internet is a 2-way street. The church just doesn't know that yet. And so the church only knows how to use one way of the street. They ship their story, sell their brand, push out their crap as often as they possibly can without any regard for the people who are on the other side. The most powerful and important part of the street for the church is not shipping your story, it's hearing their story. Right now, you as a follower of Jesus can hear anybody's story anywhere in the world, any time of the day, because almost all of us have access to the internet in one form or another. And that is insanely and incredibly powerful. If the church would just stop saying, come watch our live stream, and would start saying, we want to hear from you and we'd just love to get to know you and hear your story. Would you join a Zoom call with a couple of other people and one of our pastors? You would be amazed at the opportunity that discipleship would, the discipleship opportunities that would open up, and the pastoral care opportunities that would open up, and the way that your church would flourish digitally, because they're no longer just worried about getting their brand out there or building some sort of a platform. It's not helpful. It's not discipleship. It's just broadcast. And there are other things that I could get on my soapbox and talk about, but those are 2 of the main ones.
Come to Exponential.
Come to Exponential. Yeah, any of them. I'll be talking it, all of them for the digital tracks this next year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I have to add, I met pastors or churches, they said, if my church would be in that or that neighborhood, or if I have that or that people, or maybe if I have people like you, then I can also reach more people. But I think we have to come away from that thought. Your church is for a reason in your neighborhood, and maybe you have people in your church that are already doing great things, but you have to use it. So, for example, you have maybe people that going golf every week. Why not use it as a ministry? That's something. What we learned from our churches, we just used the thing we love for ministry, and I think that is something that other churches can use and learn. Do what you love, but do it as your ministry and do it together with Jesus, and then there can come great things out of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last question. We've got like 3 minutes. We're at this gathering 5, 7, 10 years from now. What's the on the edge idea we might not even be thinking about right now? We think we're the edge makers right now in missional space, digital space. We're doing it, but what's the thing we haven't thought of? Have you chewed on that at all?
Where's York? Somebody get York. Yeah, somebody get York. I think York's got the perspective here. I think that for me, it is hard to look any further than the current breadth of AI. And so that's where I keep getting stuck, is like what is AI going to do to make the administrative work easier so that we can do more and reach more people. So I think that's a pretty viable space. I think that we're going to experience more people living in virtual spaces than ever. As we're talking about the holistic kind of concept, I have a feeling there are going to be people that just feel more comfortable online. I'm one of them. Like, I'm going to be more myself behind a keyboard than I can be in a space like this. And so I think we're going to have more and more of that happen, and people become more and more of those types of spaces of thriving. And so we're going to have to, as the church, respond accordingly to realizing that the space is only going to grow bigger. Mm-hmm. The mission field is only going to grow more exponentially as we continue to experience a more digitized world.
Yeah.
I think God puts a burden on the heart of a generation for the next. And so boomers planted churches for Xers, and Xers planted churches for me. Mm-hmm. And we're planting very different churches, whether they be micro churches, whether they be missional communities, whether they be digital communities, because we know that Z needs them in many cases. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is that Z will choose to plant for my daughters who are alpha. Mm-hmm. But I think, and I don't know this, but the handful of people who I've talked to who are very much so Gen Z and who are in this space, is I think we will see a shift to church as platform, which is a really interesting dynamic. But I met with a couple of people, one of which was just so wildly intelligent, who literally just said, hey, he built partnerships with TikTokers and said, you can't have a chance to engage with your community at all. Allow me to build the back end for everything. You don't even have to be part of it. But allow me, it'll benefit you because your people will be that watch your content will be in community with one another, and you don't even have to participate in it. And it will benefit the kingdom because we can cultivate discipleship communities and environments that exist in digital space. And he's seen thousands of people come out of watching TikToks, engaging, and they have no idea who the leader is, who the person that's doing it. It's just, man, they're like being the church together, with church as a platform versus church being sort of centralized around a personality or a pastor or a staff or a board. And it's kind of wild. Like, it's kind of wild to see it happen. Like, people genuinely, out of just like their own desire to understand faith and be on journey, to lock arms with one another, cultivated inside of a community that actually has access to the resources they need to take that journey well. I don't know who's going to crack the code for that, and I don't know who's going to actually develop it, but I suspect, if I had to guess, that the thing that will be really, because sometimes the thing that I do is really offensive to Xers, who are like leading churches and are getting ready to hand them off to the next generation. I think the thing that my daughters or my next generation will do that'll be really offensive to me is they will insist that I am not important, that me as the leader or the figurehead or the personality, right? That my like the people just need to build relationships with one another and disciple each other.
Will become
and I think that will be the thing that, like, flights of fire under me and gets me agitated, like when I'm more of a curmudgeon, right? Like, I know that that's going to happen because I do it to other people by accident. So I know, and Xers did it to boomers, right? I know I'm going to do it. I know it's going to happen to me. And I think if I had to guess, it'll be like that.
You can join me on a beach somewhere.
Yeah,
with a
that
drink.
sounds great.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Well,
yeah.
hey, I want to thank you guys because we're out of time, but I have learned a whole lot, and my head's like spinning. I could spend another hour kind of asking theological questions and stuff. But I mean, we're going to do another panel. You can go to another panel, but you know, we'll probably dig into some of this stuff too. But help me thank them for being here.